All right. This is us. It's Terry Combs. It's Jay Bassell. And we're ready for another Equipment Zone webinar. And this is one of our special series, Terry. If you'll remember, this is Ask the Expert. And the good news is, it's not me that's the expert. You, my friend, you are the expert. And we're coming to you, folks, from Arizona. It's still summertime here. It's a little warm, but we've got a hot question to ask you, Terry Combs.
Look at you, Mr. Segway.
You see how I did that? Well, we appreciate those that have tuned in, and of course, we can't wait to upload this information as well. This is being recorded and will be on our YouTube page with several other dozens of other great videos that are both training in purpose as well as just clarification videos. And of course, occasionally we'll sneak in a little sales video in there just to keep people honest. But Terry, things are going well. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. I'm going to pre-apologize to our listeners. My landscape folks were supposed to be here yesterday and couldn't make it, and they started about 2 minutes before we went on the air. So fingers crossed that
Yeah,
if anybody can hear the buzz in the background. They're not mowing my grass, Jay. I don't have any grass, but
they're just blowing the dust and dirt around.
They are.
And only folks from Arizona or the Great Southwest would recognize that. But that's okay. We are ready to roll into this question, which is asked of us all the time, Terry. And I think you know this. This comes up whether it's in person at a trade show. Remember trade shows? We used to go to those.
Jay, I taught a screen printing class this weekend in Chicago. This question came up even in a screen printing class.
And the question is, how much does your ink cost, Terry?
Exactly right. Well, that of course, Jay. Now, here's what your typical sales rep's going to say at a trade show. Well, our ink is 36 cents per liter. It's $217 for 600 milliliter. It's this much for a cartridge. It's this much for a bulk bag. So, and my response actually is it's a relative thing. Not what does it cost? How much does that ink in that container cost me? But what is the actual consumption of ink that I'm going to be using on either your machine or somebody else's machine?
Well, and I think that's the reality of this series. And that's why I'm so glad we're doing this, is because it's not just, that's a fair question. People are obviously going to ask that. Well, how much does the ink cost? And that's a factor we obviously need to know for the Epson F2000, Epson F2100, and of course now the F3070. And there are going to be differences in those prices specific from the 2100 to the F3070. So we're not saying that it's a poor decision on your part to ask this question, but typically the source of the question comes from two places. One is maybe a very new, uninformed, potential buyer who's asking the question from a place of authenticity. But sometimes we get other folks that are asking it from a different perspective. Do you know what I mean, Terry?
Well, exactly right. Then the perspective is that guy across the aisle said your ink costs this much and his ink costs this much. Mm-hmm. The part they leave out, though, Jay, is in what is the true cost of ink in the system. And you know what? Hey, it's just like you said, it's a reasonable thing to walk around a show and say, well, how much are your cartridges? Right. The trick there also is our cartridge is 600 milliliters. Competitor cartridge is 450 milliliters. The F3070 is 1.5 liters. So the cost of that ink container, you do have to do a little bit of calculating. And yes, in high school, when they said you'll really use this algebra someday, and you said no, here it is. You need to use it today.
And not only that, but the metric system for us Americans.
The metric system.
Right? Liters, milliliters. What's going on here? Well, I think sometimes the confusion too comes from, Terry. The reality is we'd love it to be a perfect, clean formula. So for example, I use this much ink and therefore I get this yield. And now I know that this is the true cost of my, let's say t-shirt. It could be a hoodie or it could be a towel or anything. So, but even there, and I'm so grateful for having a robust training team and technical team, because I get to listen in on the tech guys and they're like, well, wait a minute. But that even that variable has variables, because the substrate that you print on, you might want to get to a finite milliliter, but you change the garment, you change the substrate, and you're going to see that more ink is required. or it consumes more in order to get a higher quality print. So I think there's just sometimes variables there that a lot of these questions, they don't go to that deeper level, which is why I'm so grateful that you're here, because you can explain it all.
Jay, and along those lines, it's there's more to it as well, with again, the additional costs involved. Let me take a step back, and the training involved. One of the reasons that we do so much training is so you have a better understanding. I've had people walk up to me that have an F2000 or an F2100 and say to me, well, my prints cost about $6 each. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And you're doing something wrong. And
And we're not laughing at you. We're truly in genuine shock. Like, it should not be
exactly
$6.
right. And come to find out is, well, I was never, and obviously they didn't buy that machine from us because they would understand this, but didn't know how to properly pre-treat. So what's the answer, Jay? Just put on more ink. Do a double or triple white underbase and hit that color. And so with the training we give you'll understand that you can do a minimal amount of ink laydown and still get a really, really great, vibrant print that you're proud to sell. So, and it's a matter of being trained properly, and that's part of our deal, as you know.
Well, it is part of our deal, and I'm not going to ever get tired of bragging about that. So those of you that are listening and watching live, that is a big factor, let's call it one of our foundational points, one of our pillars at Equipment Zone is we want to make sure that we can help you grow. We're going to be in your supply chain a true partner and not just a vendor, and there is a difference. But one of the things we prepped for, Terry, if you remember this, is we kind of, maybe I got the marketing spin got the better of me while I was preparing for this. And I started thinking, when asking this question, remember the 4 S's. Because, I'm always trying to figure out.
This reeks of marketing, by the way. Yes,
It
but
does.
go ahead.
It does. It's got a little extra layer of spin on it. But if you think about the 4 S's, we talked about setup, and we talked about spoilage, and then we talked about shelf life, and then specifically kind of some of the safety standards.
Exactly.
And I think when we start talking about ink, those are those kind of unhid or hidden or unspoken, I should say unspoken conversations that sometimes others, they're kind of like quick to move to another topic. But that's the point of our session today, is to talk about those.
Exactly right. And where do you want to start, Jay?
Well, let's talk about setup. People, first of all,
Sure.
when we think about setup, we're talking about, is there ever going to be a situation, and every printer is different. So we're talking specifically about the Epson brands, but other printers, we know a little something about those other printers.
We do.
It's our business. And so, what I mean when I say setup, Terry, but others may not. Maybe you could explain that first.
Well, correct. With the F2100, the F2000, the F3070, you're going to walk into more, you're going to turn it on, you're going to do a nozzle check, and if everything checks out, you start printing. If you have some nozzles that are blocked, you do a light head cleaning that costs pennies, and then you go about your production day. Other machines, that might be an extended process. In fact, we know there are 2, and Jay and I are from the Arizona location, so there are 2 decorators that have. One has an F3070 and one has an F2100 from us, who had another brand machine. And can I say,
Terry, I'm going to give you permission because it's their story. It's authentic to them. We're not trying to, I think the facts are important here. So I give you clearance.
Okay, well, they both had Omni machines, Omni print machines, and both of them told us they spend at least an hour every morning getting that machine ready to print. So what does that mean? To spend an hour? I mean, does it take that long to warm up? No, they're doing a nozzle check, doing a head cleaning, doing a nozzle check, doing a head cleaning, and repeat and repeat and repeat. Hey, guess what happens when you're doing those nozzle checks and then head cleanings? That's ink going into your waste tank. So all of a sudden, when somebody says, but our ink is this price, they never factor in all the ink that's going down the drain to get that printer up and running. I remember one of those companies, they had about 4 people come over to our shop for a demo, and when they got there a little early, and Roy didn't have the machine on yet, he just flipped it on, did a nozzle check, and started loading shirts. I thought one of them was going to cry. He was like, "Is that all you have to do?"
I know. I know. And we shouldn't giggle about this, but it's part of our nervous nature in that we feel lucky. We feel, I don't know, blessed. And we feel
Yeah,
grateful that the engineers at Epson and the system that they've developed, it's an aligned system. They're responsible for the software, they're responsible for the printer, and they're responsible for the print heads, and they're responsible for the ink. And so you align all of those things together, you avoid all of that other drama to a
exactly.
large extent, because truth be told, Terry, in inkjet technology and inkjet printing, doing a nozzle check, that's pretty standard operating procedure, right?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. It's something that you should do every morning just to make sure that your printer is ready to go. It takes 10 seconds to do, and we do it actually on a strip of box sealing tape so that you can take it off and hold it up and look at it. But that's just standard operating procedure, just like it really with any inkjet printer. And for the most part, we don't have to do anything once that process happens. And Jay, can I add to my story?
Yes, please, please, please add.
Roy being the not only a technician but a little bit of a comedian, that group was walking out the door, and he goes, hold on, I just want to show you how to shut down the machine too. I'll show you the process, okay? And they're like, yeah, we want to see that. And he hit the off button, and he goes, okay, that's it. And they're
Nice.
like, are you serious? That's all you have to do? So,
Well, we're not here to pick on other brands, but we just had that experience happen recently twice in Arizona. And both
right.
times, both previous owners of these other machines were just seriously, it was almost like they had a poor taste in their mouth because they saw the advantage of this system. And I think that speaks well to the ink chemistry, and how that union with the print head is so critical. And usually for us, obviously something could happen, but 99 times out of 100, we're going to just, bypass all that drama. And I can't
Right.
imagine an hour worth of doing that. I just can't.
Well, and Jay, when you're looking at ink costs, then so that hour, how many shirts could you have printed? How much more profit could you have made in that window of time? And so
And
that is part of the cost of
yes.
your ink.
And I was just thinking that too, Terry, is that, did they factor that in when they told you the price of their ink per
I'm
cartridge per
going to
milliliter?
say I don't know for certain, but I will give you a 100% correct. They did not tell you anything about waste ink.
Yeah. So in that setup, that was not something that they wanted to talk about, nor did they bring up, nor would anyone know unless they listened to somebody or a previous owner. So, sad tale out there on the internet, but sometimes what is out there is true. And there are plenty of stories like that, not just the
Well,
two that we've
and
recently
Jay,
heard.
if I could interrupt you one more time,
Please do.
well,
You're the
one more
expert.
time before the next time. Uh, I right before I logged on, I was talking to someone who's getting ready to buy an F2100. He's buying it today, but he said, I had this machine, I had this machine, I had this machine. He went down the list of machines, and he said, am I going to have a good experience this time? And it makes us, sick to hear about the troubles people have because of being sold a bill of goods, to be perfectly honest. And I was explaining to him about the costs and how quick he'll be up and running, and if he needed service, Epson will be there within 24 to 48 hours, no out of pocket expense. And I think by the end he believed me, but he had so many bad experiences,
Yeah.
and I think we'd all be in the same boat if we had lived through a lot of these machines on the market. And why they have these problems? Because the print heads they're using are not made for direct to garment inks. That's the bottom line. These print heads are made to be used for paper printing and not for direct to garment, which means when a print head is manufactured, it's manufactured with adhesives inside that are resistant to the ink you're using. Well, if you change the ink, guess what? That print head's dying inside from the minute you start printing. So those are the experiences that people are dealing with. That, my gosh, at the trade show, nobody brought this up.
Yeah, imagine that. Well, the good news is we don't have that drama. We don't have that problem. We bypass that. And so we've covered that first S in terms of the setup, but let's also talk a little bit about spoilage, That's the second S when we think of it. And what we mean by that, Terry, isn't just I forgot to say something though about setup. Terry, this came up just the other week, and I was listening to Roy, and I brought this up. One of the things we need to make sure that new purchasers of the F2100 remember is that you're going to get if you're not well prepared, you could have a shock when you think, oh my gosh, I'm out of ink already. You know what I mean, Terry? When someone thinks that.
Absolutely. So when you buy a machine from Equipment Zone, we say you really have to buy 2 white 600 milliliter cartridges immediately. And the reason we say that is the Epson comes with the 2100 anyway, comes with starter inks, which are 250 milliliter. Now those color inks, those 4 cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, you're still going to get several hundred shirts out of those starter inks. The 2 white cartridges, that 500 milliliters of white ink gets basically, after you're going to need to be putting new cartridges in after just 4 or 5, 6 shirts. So why is that? Because the white ink, it goes into a recirculation system. That ink isn't gone. It's just gone from the cartridges into the machine so that it will recirculate that white ink. So right away, you'll need those 2 white ink cartridges. So never fear though, that ink isn't gone. It's not out in the waste tank. It's inside your machine and you're still using it.
Exactly.
But like any inkjet printer, you have to have ink in every slot, or the printer will not function. That's true of every inkjet printer on the planet.
Yeah. So when we're talking about spoilage, we're not saying that. We're not saying that happened. We're saying something else. What do we mean then when we say spoilage? What are we going to refer to?
Spoilage is 2 different things. One is spoiled merchandise, and if your machine isn't printing properly, if you did a nozzle check and everything checked out fine, but then after a couple of shirts, your white ink starting to look really dull, and you go and do another nozzle check and realize you're starting to have clogging issues, that's spoilage. Those garments are spoiled. You're not
getting that ink back.
You're not getting that ink back. And again, since the Epson printhead is manufactured specifically for DTG ink, you're not going to get that type of clogging of the printhead as you go through a production run, or starvation of the printhead for laying down a lot of white ink, because the system is made to lay down a maximum amount of ink. And the other spoilage or waste is ink that goes down the drain. And that is the ink that our neighbors, both companies were within 10 minutes of us here at our Tempe office. The ink that goes down the drain from doing head cleaning after head cleaning after head cleaning, that never comes back, and it's really never accounted for until you start accounting for it, in your own shop. And then all of a sudden, when you look at, okay, this print costs this much, oh, and let's add in another 20% or 25% or 30% of waste ink that went into the waste tank, getting the machine up and ready to print, or during the production day, having to do head cleanings to keep that printer running. So that's spoilage, and it's something you're going to have very, very little of with one of the Epson DTG printers.
Excellent point. Well, that grounds the second base. Now we're heading into third here with the second covered first 2 S's. We're going for the third S. And this is important too, because the shelf life of this ink and how Epson manufactures it. And that's a big deal. Can you speak to that as our DTG expert, Mr. Combs?
Well, absolutely. Epson inks have a 2-year shelf life. And the most of any ink system on the market, there are some ink systems that where the shelf life is, for their white ink anyway, is as short as 90 days. And so, white ink is rather expensive to be throwing away after 90 days if you didn't use it all. So that's definitely something that you need to look at. And Jeff, if I could address some misinformation out there.
Please do.
There are some competitors who will say, well, the Epson ink though has a 6-month shelf life once you put it in the machine. Now, if you stop and think about it, you think, why? What is that supposed to mean? The ink is still in the cartridge. The shelf life does not change once you load it into your printer. So if I can hopefully dispel that misinformation with our listeners here today, and folks who are listening in the archives, yes, the shelf life does not change on Epson inks once you load it in the machine. That is purposeful misinformation. It's still 2 years.
Oh,
And Jay, um, a lot of people buy ink from Equipment Zone because we keep ink in inventory, but we also turn it very quickly. So you're not going to get ink from Equipment Zone that's been on our shelf for 6 months or 3 months, or rarely even 1 month. We turn a lot of ink because we have lots of customers buying ink from us. So the ink you get from us is pretty fresh right from Epson.
yeah,
So you don't need
yeah.
to worry about that. And that's important, I think, for two reasons. One, maybe you're not doing a lot of business right now today. And so it's important that
Mhm.
that ink has a longer shelf life. Add to that, I can have ink sitting on my shelf. So when I do run out, and I'm that guy, Jay, we're both
Mm.
old production guys, and when I
Well,
would
I don't know
always
about
have
old, but yes, I know what you're trying to say.
we're veteran production guys. And so when I would be in a situation where I was low on ink, I always had spares on the shelf.
Mhm.
Well, if the ink has a shelf life of just 90 days, there's not a chance I'm going to keep that on my shelf, so
Yeah, yeah,
um
good point.
in this, so I can have it sitting there and feel confident that if I don't pull that ink off the shelf within 2 years, I have some other problem.
Right. No, you do. Well, it's always interesting to me that it seems like we're the ones that are defending the misinformation. So you almost have to wonder why is everyone else keep saying this, or why are they pointing to us and saying, yeah, but their inks are expensive, or yeah, but the shelf life isn't as long. It's like, well, wait
Yeah.
a minute. It's almost like you want to point right back and say, okay, time out. Let's talk about shelf life. How'd you like to have that conversation? Well,
Yeah.
I won't name who usually brings that up, but it starts with a B, and I think people can figure it out. So
And it's not my sister.
because they don't have the same claim, they can't say that they have a
Right.
2 year shelf. Now, why is that? Maybe we could just dig in that for a minute. I want to go too deep because we want to keep the session shorter, but what is it about why is there a shelf life? What happens to that ink?
Well, because and it's primarily with white ink.
That's really
That's the
yeah.
concern. So white ink has titanium dioxide in it. That's and titanium dioxide. And by the way, people in California, they're told, be careful of titanium dioxide. That product is in for foods and things like that. It's not for inks, especially cured inks. So titanium dioxide in garment printing ink and DTG ink is completely and perfectly safe for you to use, but it will settle, which means that it will go to the bottom of the container and solidify. The Epson inks are very well suspended, and by being well suspended, I mean that they don't settle into the bottom of the cartridge or into the bottom of the 1.5 liter bag. Now, are we going to tell you to shake that white ink every morning? We are. All direct-to-garment printers, you need to shake up the white ink. Just gently shake it every single morning. The difference with the Epson printer is it will tell you. It'll say, shake your 2 white ink cartridges. Now, you can lie to it and say you did it, but don't be that person.
Yeah.
The
Don't
reason
be
it
that guy.
says it is because it's important to keep that ink stirred up. And so the ink in the machine is in a recirculation system doing exactly that same thing. It's mixing up that white ink and the titanium dioxide. But again, Jay, in the old days of DTG, way back 16 years ago, you'd come in the morning and your white ink, it would be solid white on the bottom and water on top.
Oh my
So
goodness.
those were the days that some people still talk about on the internet. You got to be careful of your white ink, but at least with Epson, those days are behind us.
Yeah, it would be great, by the way. Somebody just commented about when will there be an auto shake mode on the Epson 2400. I'm making that up. There isn't an Epson 2400, but I don't know if that's ever going to be there, but it's
Well, I think
important.
if you live near the fault line in California or there in Missouri, that's the closest you're going to have to auto shake.
Listen,
But
nobody needs that in their lives, but it is an important point. I'm glad you reminded all of our listeners and watching, that's something that is across the board. It's not unique to just Epson, but that the suspension and the longevity of those that engineering and that technology for us is superior. And so it starts to feel like we have a theme when we think about, those 4 S's, when we think about setup, when we think about spoilage, and when we think about this shelf life. Maybe there's a reason that these inks are expensive, even though I don't know that that's the right term for it, but for lack of a better word, that seems to be what we get labeled as. So either
right.
way, it seems like there's been a lot of thought and a lot of energy put into this.
Yeah, and it's difficult, I think, for someone who's just comparing machine to machine to machine to factor those types of things in. But first of all, with the profitability of printing DTG, when the average shirt printed, let's not even talk about sweatshirts, but the average t-shirt sells for $20, $25, $30, the ink portion of it becomes a smaller factor. What becomes the bigger factor is how efficient is that machine.
Mm-hmm.
Can I run this machine shirt after shirt after shirt? Well, you can with the Epson. You can't necessarily do that with other machines on the market. So all of a sudden, my $15 to $20 to $25 margin that I'm making on every shirt, what matters most to me is not what the ink costs. What matters to me is how many shirts can I get out the door?
Yeah, it's the final yield. That's what's going to create your true net profitability. And I think that that's something that a business owner needs to understand.
Correct.
Is that, of course, the ink is a factor, but as you so well put and so well stated, it's really the efficiency and the final product and the final profitability of that. Well, we're rounding third. We've got one more S.
We're heading home.
Yeah, we're heading home. And you talked about it just briefly. You talked about safety factor when you were kind of teasing Californians. But it's important to know, and I know our good friend Matt Rome spends a lot of time talking about the Okie-Tex and all of the safety labels and what that all means. And they're, surprising to me when he was the first time I listened to him go deep on that subject. I was surprised that he said, there are other manufacturers that cannot make these claims.
Exactly.
And I was
right.
like,
So
wow.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And the bottom line is Epson puts lots of effort into making a product that is safe for everyone to use. And so the Epson inks and the Epson pre-treat are both certified safe for adults, for children, for infant apparel. And that's really important because if you go out there discount shopping for ink, it's hard telling what's in that ink, and they will not have that type of certification that you can be confident. And Jay, as you well know, we have customers that all they print is infant apparel. All they do print are onesies. That's we have a customer in California who only has. She has the 8-up 4x4 platen, and she prints 8 onesies at a time, and that's her entire marketplace. And I love niche markets, so I'm very I admire her very much.
we know Terry's crazy about the niches.
I'm crazy about those niches.
But it's fun to see how people are using this setup, and others, as you know, Terry, that are doing pillows, literally pillows. I mean,
oh yeah, exactly.
So you're sleeping on this ink for hours at a time. I mean, breathing in, breathing out. So it has to be safe. And Epson's taken the high road and gone to every length, every measure to get this certified, and not only just like meet the bare minimums, but to surpass that. So
correct. And so you can confidently, and as I said, the white ink also perfectly safe in the form that it's used. So it's, and I think we all, again, unless your niche is somewhere else, there's always opportunity to print youth and toddler apparel. And anybody that's ever had kids or grandkids, that shirt goes right in their mouth. So you want it to be safe.
Definitely. Well, is there anything, Terry, before we conclude that you want to add as it relates to this question? How much does your ink cost? Or, well, I heard from the other guys that Epson inks are expensive. Is there anything else you can add or think to
Well,
add or thought
well, I
of?
did have someone say that to me while I was teaching a screen printing class, as I said. So,
So
so
you,
that's the misinformation that. Well, here's my comment on that, Jay. If you are talking to another manufacturer, another reseller, and they have to go to throwing stones at the competition, then there's probably something that if they can't sell you on the quality of their product and they have to throw stones at the competition, then they're probably lacking somewhere in what they're offering you.
excellent point. And anytime we bring up, just to be clear and to be truthful and honest and all transparency, anytime we bring up another brand or mention anybody, it's because we somehow are put on the defense and we just need, for clarity's sake, we need to be able to distinguish and differentiate ourselves. So I hope that people don't jump to the conclusion that we're trying to throw somebody under the bus, an Omni or a Brother or whoever we gently teased along the way. But the reality is that we think you made a great decision if you are indeed an owner of an Epson DTG printer, or for those of you that are watching today that have been on the fence and been considering it. We want to tell the truth. It's only in our best interest, because once you get all these facts and you realize, oh, there's deeper questions to ask, more than just how much does this ink cost, and that we actually have those answers thanks to, in part, the expert, Mr. Combs, then it tells a different story and the outcome is significantly better. The context of how much does the ink cost? There's so many other factors to weigh in.
Exactly right.
All right. So thank you for everyone who's tuned in. How much does your ink cost? You can see that on the screen, correct, Terry? I just want to double check.
I can indeed.
Okay. And then, so I have a couple more things before we conclude. I want others to know that we've just answered this question as well. But guess what? We have a wonderful group that we'd love everybody who's tuned in today. If you have not already joined, please do that. We do make a few exceptions for folks that are outside of the US, but we do like to vet this group so that it is a private group. Not everyone in here is a client of Equipment Zone by design. We love to get input from everybody. And this is a great group for support, for questions, crazy things you've never seen before that always seem to happen on Saturday when Equipment Zone is closed. Right. Well, guess what? There's out of this, there are now 1,200 users here, 1,200 members of this group. And I got to tell you, there's an active group of 100 that are constantly just yep, I saw that, or, oh, I tried this, or, giving their, imparting some wisdom and some insights, which is great. So it's free to join. Please, take advantage of it, I guess is what I was going to say.
Exactly right. It's a great group and positive reinforcement. I'm having this issue, and there's so many people that jump in with suggestions. And like you said, Jay, that happened to me. So here was my solution. So
and ink comes up a lot. So there's lots of great topics, and you can go into the group once you're there, and you can search for a topic, and you'll see lots of great answers. So there's that. And then there's also, of course, our YouTube page. We love our YouTube channel. We have, 16,000 subscribers now, and we want more because we are expanding our pie. We want people to have the answers. When I say we want more knowledge to get disseminated. We want more truth to be told. We want people to have all of the story, not just the parts that are convenient to a salesperson. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that, of course, is free. We have usually 1 or 2 videos going up every week, if not several a month. So there's always fresh material there. Thanks to Terry and Roy and Amy.
We
and Jeff.
are quite prolific.
We try to be, and we try to find topics like this that sometimes aren't often obvious. And then if you need to reach out to anybody, here's our key contact information page. So you've got us, our emails, our phone numbers, and that's about all I have, Terry, unless you have anything else.
I just look forward to our next webinar and the one after that and the one after that, Jay.
Excellent. Well, thanks for everybody who tuned in, and those of you watching on YouTube, we appreciate that. And we will be continuing this series of Ask the DTG Expert, which will, for now, continue to, I'll be your host, and Terry will be the talent.
All right. That sounds awesome.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.